Can you give me a sense of how we as youth leaders help other youth provide space making for themselves? So at the YMI, we talk a lot about mentoring youth, giving them responsibilities, setting them up for success, and letting them plan and have ownership of their programs and their spaces as much as we can. What would it look like for this to happen in the field of space making?
Yeah, I have some great examples of what not to do. Uh, One that kind of like stands out really vividly for me, is where these conversations were happening in an organization I was serving in. I was not the main person, but within I was actually the youth pastor. And we invited the kids to like decision making tables, and they came back with our invitation to state what they needed and wanted, and they did that. And then we're like, no, but we can't do that. And so we really wanted them, right, to do it in this area only, but the invitation didn't say within these parameters, right? And so that was definitely one of the most frustrating moments for me, especially, it was like my daughter was a youth person in that organization as well. So I was trying to be there as a parent, not as a pastor, but still trying to figure out, at the time I didn't really, I guess, hadn't had a lot of experience. Like, wait, what just happened here, right? So since then, at Salas Center, for example, I've tried very hard to like take that more seriously, and I don't think I have it, have it calibrated just right, where it's like, having like free reign of the place is certainly not the answer either. It's like, how do you, again, I think bring them into a serious conversation on, like, here are the parameters we've got. What are some parameters you need? And then like, kind of like in a negotiation of, what does decision making look like for this group of folk in this setting, et cetera, right? Because I think sometimes even the idea of mentorship, right, where it's like, okay, I'm coming to you, if I'm the mentor, you're the mentee, let me tell you how that looks, right? As opposed to, how do we then collaborate in this space? So one of the things now when I work with students or younger folk, I say, okay, look, here's what we need as an organization. You know what I'm saying? Like, here's some of your duties, but I've also left room within this, however many hours you've got. I want to leave like a percentage of those hours to like, what do you want to learn? What are the things that you have that you want to leave this setting having experienced or explored? And almost always we have to come back to that question because people are not ready for that. They're like, wait, what? They're just used to saying, okay, just tell me what I need to do so I can go do it and I can go get this grade or get X, Y, or
Yep.
Z, right? Get credit for being here. But
Yep.
to truly then say, okay, look, here's what we need. So if it's like, okay, here's the physical space you can use, not what do you need, but here's the space we've got. The parameters are such, we've got these resources. We can only maybe do stuff on these days or whatever else. What are the parameters you have that you want to bring into this, so they could be also taken seriously, so really to truly ask them, but to be clear about, where your edges are, if there are some, which I mean, everywhere there are some, right? Boundaries are important. But not to like do this blanket invitation as though those boundaries aren't there. And then once they've done that work, then be like, oh no, just kidding. Because what you're doing, you're reinforcing this idea that children are to be seen and not heard. And that's not at all what we're trying to do, right? So it's going to require, a realness and authenticity, like again, a self-audit as adults, as an organization, um, to then be able to in the posture of listening. And sometimes it's very difficult truths like, oof, that hurts because our intentions weren't that, which is, often your intentions may not be what actually is the impact of what happens, right? So being open to like realizing that we got it all the way wrong, and then having learned that, committing to figuring out a way forward. How do we not continue to perpetuate that harm that has happened? How do we acknowledge it, apologize for it, or whatever, makes sense, and then let's move forward so we don't keep repeating that harm or, future harms. And I think that posture actually allows us to circumvent future harms, even if it's a different kind, right? But like we're now building a culture that has space to evolve and learn together, but not to like impose or like, um, tell people how they can be who they are. I have this like long-standing belief, that when children come into the world, the they're like so like God filled, and as they're like learning life outside the womb, we're teaching them all this stuff that takes them away from that godness, right? And then all of a sudden, as adults, we have to start unlearning the things that we learned to try to get back to what we've always known before we knew it, And so what would happen though if we actually took seriously, the young folk in our communities and like listened differently And not only that will help us in our unlearning, but it'll help them not have to unlearn things that we've just kind of like accidentally taught them,
Yep.
About the goodness of who God is creating them to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.